I hit. Thank you so much to both of you.
Good evening. Thanks. Thanks for having us. So I don't know how you'd like to proceed. Would you like us to go into the questions, Luz, and we can start from there? Buenas tardes. We're here to help you tonight. There are a number of questions, and we will start just from the top. So, John, I'm going to read the first one off for you, and why don't you give me how you would handle this, and then I'll throw some things in as well. So the first question says, I entered in September of 2005. Immigration stopped me, no surprise, and sent me to Mexico, also no surprise. I re-entered in October 2005, again, no surprise. And since that date, I have been here in the United States. My question is, can you ask for two pardons here in the United States, one for having entered and the other for having re-entered as they say a re-entry? Okay, so John, would you like to break that down for the audience and kind of give me your view on when you have someone coming into the office, what do you do in that situation? This is and I kept saying no surprise, this is a very, very common scenario.
So the first thing that we want to do when somebody comes into the office and when they've been caught or stopped at the border is to find out more information about what happened at that time. Because not everybody who was stopped and sent back to Mexico has a significant immigration problem that would cause them to need to seek a waiver. So in order to do that, then our first step would be to assist them in getting whatever information we can from the people who are at the border, Customs and Border Patrol. So generally what we do almost with every case of this nature is we start with sending out Freedom of Information Act requests to various agencies. Now, that's kind of a technical term. We've been asked to try to break down technical terms. And so Freedom of Information is a law that allows us to basically see most everything that the government has in their possession. They do block out some things, but for purposes of our discussion, we'll just assume that we can get that information. So we fill out a simple form. It generally doesn't cost anything. And we send it off to that agency. In a situation like this, we might want to see if there was something that involved the immigration court. So we might send it off to them as well. And then we wait for the results. There's something that is called catch and release, which happens a lot, where they stop people at the border and they send them back to Mexico. And that generally is not considered an expedite. Well, again, that's not an immigration problem. So that would be the first thing we're looking at to see if it was what we call a catch and release. So if it was that, then I guess the next thing that happened in this situation was they entered. Then once they entered the country, they accumulate unlawful presence, meaning they're in the country basically unlawfully, but unless and until they seek to leave the country again, that is not going to affect them again until they're seeking something. I don't know, that sounds kind of complicated. Maybe you can clean that up for me, Jay.
Sure, John. So anytime you're encountered at the government has the first option is that they, as John had stated, they can just send you back, and it really has no consequences. So if you come back a month later, you were just sent back and you came back a month later. And so they don't like it. It's a misdemeanor, but they can't really do much about that. But they also have the option of giving you what is called an expedited removal. And if they give you an expedited removal, it's the same thing as having a deportation order. And if you enter after a deportation order, then you have other penalties, and it's going to be very, very hard to do anything with that type of case if it's an expedited removal. But I would say in probably 90% of the cases, it's called a voluntary return. They sent you back and you came back in. And then that's what kicks in when John talked about doing these background checks, chequeos de trasfondo, as we would say it. And there are laws that allow us to see what immigration has in its files. And so part of that may be filling out some paperwork and sending it to a government agency, and another part may be running your prints so that we can see if you come up in the database. Because what I tell the clients frequently is you can change your name, but you cannot, fingerprints don't lie. Okay, so they can figure it out. And so we want to know everything, because if you came in after a removal order, you've got a big problem, and our options are going to be limited. So you're not really talking about two pardons, you're really talking about one, and that is for the unlawful presence. And once you have remained in the United States unlawfully for more than 365 days, then upon departure from the United States, you cannot come back for 10 years. And that's where the pardon comes in. Now, another thing that a lot of clients, especially from Mexico, do is they'll come and stay 365 days or more, 5 years, and then say, abuela got sick and I'm going to go down there. I mean, the families are very important in Mexican culture. And so they go down after they've been here a year or more unlawfully. That is a big problem if they seek to re-enter after that, because then they have the permanent bar. So the permanent bar is something we call, it's a 10-year bar or 10-year penalty that you have to spend 10 years outside of the United States before you can ever come back. So it's very, very important that you tell the immigration attorney everything that you know about this, because you don't want the government figuring it out when you're sitting in Ciudad Juarez and your family is sitting up here in the United States and you can't get back in. So we try to do what we call our due diligence, la diligencia normal sobre el caso, due diligence. You have to tell us what you know, and then 99% of the time we'll get it figured out, and then we'll tell you what to do.
Jim, can I just follow up with a question for you that we get a lot and hear what you would tell somebody? I went back to visit Abuela, and when I came back, I never got caught. So how are they going to know?
At that point, my hearing aids usually kick out, and I didn't hear it. But that's a little bit of a joke. If you bring that to the attention of an attorney, if the attorney is being honest and ethical, the attorney will not take your case, and because you're not qualified for the benefit. Now, what I do tell clients is, if you go to another attorney and you don't tell them that, I'm not here to turn you in. But if that ever comes up to the light of day, then they will keep you out of the country. And it's not just a question of, hey, I didn't get caught coming back in. What traces did you leave behind when you were down in Mexico? Did you get a new ID card? Did you have encounters with the government? Because I think the safest thing in giving advice to clients And with the technology the way it is you just have to assume the government can figure out everything if they want to dedicate the resources to it. And the problem with trying to cover something up like that is maybe you'll get away with it initially, but when you go to naturalize, if it comes up, they may figure it out at that time, and then you'll have a number of years in the United States, and then they'll try to deport you. So it's very, very important that you be as honest as you possibly can be. It's a legal obligation, but it's also in your best interest.
And if it comes up when you're outside the country, you won't be allowed back in the country for 10 years.
That is correct.
Or even longer.
Or life. I mean, that's it because it becomes a fraud issue at that
Right.
as well.
So let's see.
Would you like to hit me with that one, the pardon? You want me to do that one? You want to read
Okay.
that one off?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
Okay.
when the pardon is obtained here in the United States, is it safe to go to the interview at the embassy in Mexico? Or could it be that I do not obtain the documents?
Okay. An honest answer to that question is anytime you leave the United States and you go before a government agency abroad, there is always a risk that you're not going to get back in. The only person that probably has absolutely no risk is a US citizen because they have to let you back into the country. So that question has to be answered kind of in the affirmative, but it has to be answered completely. If you have done your homework and you have done things properly, there should be no reason why you cannot come back in. But I have had a client or two that did not tell me that they crossed the border a couple of times and it came up. And so if you're not being forthcoming, then you may get stuck down there. So you want to be very, very careful. And also you just need to tell you that, I mean, the attorney, John, I'm sure you do this too. I run FBI fingerprints as well because I want to see if there's any criminal history.
Right.
But if there's an undiscovered criminal history someplace that the attorneys don't know about, they can't warn you not to go down there with this on your record. So we just need everybody to be as forthcoming as possible. So if the due diligence is done, diligencia normal, la investigación normal is done, then you should have no problem. Okay, here's a good one, John. What can someone do when you have a case open with an attorney's office, but the office does not return calls back when you have tried calling the office and cell phone?
Well, excellent question. And while that doesn't happen with either Jim or me, we hear about other attorneys where clients will come to us and complain that they have been unable to reach their attorney in quite some time. You can get a second opinion with another attorney, and sometimes what we'll do if you come to us where there's another attorney handling the case, we'll be able to see exactly where the case is, what status the case is. And it could be that it's just pending. Some of the cases are going to pen for 2 or 3 years. We can help look up the processing times and things of that nature to give you an idea of whether anything is likely to be happening. But it's also unethical for an attorney to ignore the client. So at some point, you could file a complaint with the Florida Bar if they're Florida Bar members, or if they're a member of another state, I suppose you could file a bar complaint with that state.
Yeah, what I would like to say about that is we do try to do our best to get everybody called back. We are humans. If we're not answering the calls after several times, I think that you need to really tell the attorney, listen, I need a call back. I need to know what's going on. But you can go to the bar. We try to have a system in our office where we answer the calls. Are we perfect? No, we're not. But if it's called to our attention that something needs to be handled, we'll certainly try to give you a call back. We try to keep your information at hand so that we can answer your questions. Now, understand something. You cannot have another person unless they have specific permission to speak to permission to speak to us from you. So if you have someone else call in on your case, we're not even going to acknowledge that you're our client. So it needs to be you doing the calling and leaving a message. And then if they do not get back to you, like John said, go to another attorney, or you can file a bar complaint. All right, John, here's one for you. How do I get my criminal record with or without fingerprints? Record of FBI, ICE, police, for everything I need to know about my criminal record.
Well,
I think there are a few questions in that one, so you might want to just break it down.
okay. Well, there again, this goes back to what the first step of what we do in many cases, which is to try to gather as much information as we can about your contacts with both the criminal system and the immigration system. So, for example, in most cases where, particularly where we think there was something that happened of a criminal nature, we will do fingerprints, and we will, for a nominal fee to the FBI, I think it's $18 now, we will do the fingerprints and send it off and wait. They're pretty quick about getting back to us with your record of what they have. So that's one thing you can do, a fingerprint check with the FBI. Now, we found that the FBI results, interestingly enough, are not always complete. So the second thing you could do, for example, if you know that something happened in Florida, you can go to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and do a, I think they may request fingerprints as well, I can't remember, but request their records as well to see what they have. And likewise, you can contact pretty much every state or county or city even where you think there might have been a criminal matter. I guess, for example, somebody came into my office yesterday and had a case that we are going to have to find every criminal matter that there ever was. And he said, well, I think there was something maybe in Tampa, but I'm not sure. It's like 30 years ago. But I know the rest were in Sarasota. So, you know, something like that, you can go directly to the county and the FBI, and again, you know, the different counties, because you really don't want to miss everything. So you try to be as complete as possible. And then with ICE, we talked about that. That's the same sort of question about the border. You can do a request to get the records from Customs and Border Patrol, and ICE. You know, ICE also are the people that prosecute cases in immigration court. So we would request something from immigration court to see if there's anything there. So pretty much, you know, that's like the initial legwork to a case, to pretty much look under every rock to see that we're not missing everything. Do you have
Very
any other-
good.
Any other tips on that?
No, I'm just really partisan to the FBI reports. I really haven't done the state background checks. That's a good one. I didn't think about doing that one.
Yeah.
And I like to start with the FBI report because that tells me what counties I have to go to or whatever. And a lot of times, for example, in Sarasota and Manatee, if the records are old, they'll just have like a computer printout of the records. They won't even have the complaints and things like that. So
Mhm.
those are issues that can come up as well. Someone asked, does the immigration attorney get criminal records for us? I saw that in the dialogue box. I'm going to tell you something. Yeah, I can do that, but you really don't want to pay me to go down to the court if you know the dates of the incidents, because I'm going to charge you a lot of money, and I'm probably not going to be smiling at you when you can just go do it yourself. They don't bite and they don't bark at the courts. They're used to people coming in and getting this stuff all the time, and it doesn't really matter whether you have papers or not. They're not going to. I have yet, knock on wood, because anything can happen, I have yet to see someone have a problem. But that does bring up something with the fingerprinting. Normally, we're not having problems with people, even if they're undocumented, going in to getting their prints. Every once in a while, you'll have an officer. I think that they were, maybe they think they were deputized by Trump or something. They were hired by Trump, and they'll ask a lot of questions of the person, and we just tell them get out of there, and then send them back, maybe to Sarasota, or if it's in Sarasota to Manatee. But that, I can only think of that happening once or twice in the last 2 years. It's very, very uncommon.
We started doing fingerprints in-house.
You did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I think that's great. I was going to do that, and never got it done. So I'm going to have to talk with you online about how you set that up.
Yeah. I was lucky. I inherited somebody who came as a paralegal with that knowledge. So that's how it gets.
That's very, very convenient.
Yeah.
That's very convenient. As an immigrant, how do I get a social security number to work?
So that's not really the right question in this case. The right question is, how do I get permission to work? Because the social security number is not the evidence for an immigrant that they're going to need in order to be able to work lawfully. So in order to get the social security number, you have to apply for a work card. And in order to be eligible for a work card, then you have to be eligible for one of the pathways, of which there are many, many that allow you to work in the United States. Like, I think, didn't we talk about this last time? Venezuelan TPS. I think we had a talk where we talked about that, and so that's a pathway. Or somebody as a spouse petition is applying for you. But in any case, just to kind of get back to the original question, the only way you can get a social security number to work is to get a work card or a green card, I guess.
Now, there are people that have, there were years ago that they would just issue a social security card to anybody. And I see that, I think it's probably, I'm kind of pinning my age on myself. I think it's in the 50 or older above crowd where they would come and they would get social security numbers. People actually do work off of them, but that doesn't mean that they're legally entitled to work. They're still working unlawfully. The difference being that maybe that one's not going to trigger so many problems because it was gained lawfully at the time, and it's just something the government's aware of. But so you're not going to get a social security number just like that.
Right.
And if you do get there are sometimes people will be issued were issued in the past social security numbers, and it will have a mark. It'll have a special endorsement on there, not valid without USCIS employment authorization. So, John, you hit that one right on the head. The question is backwards. You need to have the authorization to work.
And just to make sure everybody understands, for those people that go out and buy a social security card on the street, that is not legal. So
All right.
not a pathway to lawfully working.
Why don't you hit me up with the next question there, John?
Sure. That number that the government gives to us in order to work as a person without immigrant status, can it be used to build credit or open a bank account, etc.?
Okay, so that's talking about the ITIN. The ITIN is an interesting thing because it's you may be working here illegally, but government still wants its darn money. So they'll be more than happy to allow you to file your tax return every year. And that's what the taxpayer ID number is. It's called an ITIN. But it really is only, and I want to emphasize that it is really solamente para los impuestos. It's only for the taxes. Please do not try to use that number to work or open bank accounts, because they know, the government knows that that's only for tax purposes. And I've heard of people getting picked up using that as a social security number. So it's just really, really unwise to use that for anything other than its designated purpose.
And just to follow up on that, because I get a lot of people that say, well, I'm going to tell the IRS that I'm here illegally. There's something interesting about the IRS. They will not share that with any other agency. So people should not be worried about paying their taxes and worrying that that information is going to be turned over to immigration.
And that goes really into the next question. I think these two questions fit together very well. If the immigration reform comes into reality, how can we be prepared to take advantage of this opportunity? John, what do you tell people?
Well, I mean, even before the present discussion, we have always encouraged people to save their documents to show that they've been here for a long time, because some of these things that they talk about depend upon them having lived in the United States for 5, 10, 15 years, whatever. So you need to document your life and existence here in the United States. So that's one thing. In terms of the immigration reform that they've been talking about, unfortunately, until it's broken down into its parts, it's not likely to pass because of Republican opposition, and it can't, that Biden and his party can't get around Republicans in getting immigration passed. So in terms of that, that's going to be a problem. But there may be things, that work for many people, like DACA may be expanded or things of that nature. We don't even know. But until we get more information, it's hard to know all the things that you will need. But as I said, I mean, keep your record clean. And don't get into trouble. Obviously, we just said that, and try to keep records of your existence here in the United States.
Yeah, what I tell people is pretty much the same thing you say, John. But I take it, I try to take it a step further. I say, you're going to need to prove your presence here. And one of the biggest proofs of your presence is that you filed taxes.
Correct.
And so I tell everybody, file your taxes, but don't just file any old tax form. And what I mean by that, and this is very common with the clients that I deal with, you have to understand something. If I do something wrong, I can get in trouble with the bar. But if I become a tax preparer and I do something wrong, it doesn't seem like anything ever happens to the tax preparers. And so we're seeing on tax returns that people put the abuela, el tío, el perro, they put everybody on that tax return that really doesn't belong there. Or they may be married and they love to put head of household, because head of household gets you cash back at the end of the year. And there is one particular tax preparer in this city that whom I love with all of my heart, who loves to do that. And I think you should avoid that person like the plague. And probably everybody sitting around this table knows who I'm talking about. And you should probably go to a CPA or go to something reputable like H&R Block that will not pull these tricks. It's a very tempting thing to do this because I know, in this country, wages are suppressed, wages are low. It's tempting to say, hey, I can get $4,000 or $5,000 at the end of the year. But, what do we say in Spanish? El barato vuelve muy caro a lo largo. What seems to be low, easy at the beginning becomes very difficult, or the cheap can be very expensive. If you are paying your taxes properly, if you are filing those tax returns, if you are staying out of trouble with the law, those are the biggest things that you can do. And keep your documents as John said, and copies of your phone bills and things like that. And you know what? With the technology that we have now, you can scan things, so you can scan all your bills and things like that. So that's what I would say to prepare for an immigration reform. But as John said, I don't think there's much chance of it right now with the political landscape. Okay, let's go on. Here's a fun one, John. I have been living here for 21 years and have 4 children. How can I apply for residence?
So this is something that comes up all the time. I've had, I'm sure Jim has clients that come in and they say, we go through their background and they say, well, it's okay because in 3 years, my oldest is going to turn 21 and then she's going to petition for me because she's a citizen. And I assume maybe that they meant that the children are citizens. We'll assume for the question that.
That's the way I read it, John.
Yeah. And so then we have to ask, okay, how did you enter the country? And El Desierto, oh, okay. So they entered without a visa, and then we have to tell them, well, unfortunately, your children are not going to be able to petition for you because you didn't enter with a visa. So now if you did, we do have some lucky people that come to us. Not too often, but they may have come with a border crossing card. That seems to be one of the things that's hugely helpful. And when their child reaches 21 and they have a border crossing card, then they can petition for them because they're immediate relatives of a U.S. citizen. So it kind of comes down to how did you enter the country? And, as to other situations, I mean, there's probably more than one other possibility. There may be others, such as if you are unlucky enough to get put into immigration court and you've been living here, as it says, 21 years, and you have U.S. citizen children. If the children have medical issues, I've had people come into the office. One lady came in recently, she had 2 children with autism. And if they're facing deportation, they paid their taxes, They have proof that they've lived here for 10 years. They have no significant criminal matters. And we can show that it would be an extreme and unusual, basically it would be hard, very, very hard for their children if the family was forced to go back to Mexico or some other country. Then the judge in that case can grant them basically a green card. So those are the two that jump to mind where it's possible. But otherwise, you just have to make a big difference. You have to be aware whether you entered the United States legally or not legally.
Okay, I'm gonna elaborate a little bit on that. When John says you cannot do a petition, what he means really is you can't carry the case out to completion. You could do an I-130 petition for your parent, and I want to clarify this. I'm not trying to be nitpicky, because there are people who will do this to the clients. The notarios are notorious notarios for doing crazy stuff. So let's say you have a 21-year-old child and you came to the country unlawfully, so without inspection, illegal. Your kid can apply for you, but you cannot get your green card here, and you have to go out of the country to get your green card. And then you have if you've been here for more than 1 year unlawfully, then they will tell you at the embassy or at the consulate, oh, you have this penalty, you can't go back. But everybody will think everything's just going great because all the paperwork keeps coming, the I-130 gets approved, and they spring it on you at the last minute. And part of that, I think, is by design. That's the way they enforce the immigration laws. And so I would just be very, very careful with that, especially with the notarios. Now, if one of these 21-year-olds happens to join the military, then you can do a parole in place based upon being the parent of a military child. I've done a number of those, and those are really effective.
And just to follow up what that means, it basically gives you kind of the equivalent of entering with a visa.
Correct. And then you can get your green card. So I'm not a big fan of the military, but like if you have a kid who you can't stop from going into the military or something like that, maybe it's for the best and you can get your green card that way. So, all right. John, I've been working for the same business for 10 years. Would this help me obtain legal status? And if so, would I have to change my current social security number for a new one? There are a few fun facts in that question.
Right. Well, again, we assume that the person who's been working for the same business does not have legal, okay, because it says, would it help me obtain legal status? We get this all the time. Employers will bring their favorite employees into the office and say they want to sponsor them. And unfortunately, it's not that easy. I'm way less of an expert than Jim is on this, so he might want to elaborate. But in any case, once you've been in the country, particularly, I guess, if you've entered unlawfully, then a sponsor, an employer sponsor, is going to be very difficult to get. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. So, well, here's what the deal is. The law allows employers to sponsor employees, but if you've been here for over 1 year unlawfully, chances are you're not going to be able to get your green card in the United States because you are here illegally. And so then you have to go out of the country, and the 10-year penalty, the 10-year bar then applies, and unless you have a relative, and not a job, but a relative that can give you a waiver, you're going to have to wait outside the country 10 years before you could actually have that green card issued to you. So for most people who have been here for more than a year unlawfully, their employment-based sponsorship doesn't work. Now there is a subset of people who had papers filed years and years ago, and I'm going to, Don Carlos, I'm going to address your question about 245I right now. People who had papers, the first cutoff date, I think, was January 14th, 1998, was the 245I, the first one, which meant that if you had certain papers filed by that date, you could pay $1,000 penalty and you could get your green card here. Okay, and if you have something like this, you should definitely see an attorney because these rules are very, very complicated. Then the second one was for April 30th, 2001. You had to have something filed by April 30th, 2001. So they extended it. But you had to prove something crazy like you were in the United States on December 20th, 2000, the day, or the 21st. I always get the day wrong. And you have to prove that you were physically present in the United States. With that type of a scenario, you can do an employment-based sponsorship. But how many years ago was that now? That was 20 years ago. So how many people have that? Not very many. But there are some crazy rules about the children and all these other things of the like if your mother and father had this, maybe you could, if you were a beneficiary at the time, if you could have been included on the petition. So it's very, very complicated. Now, I think Don Carlos on the questions here had said, well, what will they reenact 245I and just legalize a bunch of people? 245I, again, is if you file a petition and you pay the $1,000 fine, you don't have to go back to your home country. It isn't going to happen, all right? The Republicans see that as a form of amnesty, as a backdoor way, and unless there's comprehensive, a huge immigration reform package, they're not putting 245I back into effect. The last time they were going to vote on 245I, very few people know this, but 245I, this clause, they were going to extend it for a few more months. And they were on the House floor voting on it. And it was September 11th, 2001, and they had to evacuate the House of Representatives. Okay, they were going to extend it for a few more months. And that kind of put the kibosh on it. That kind of ended it. So it's not going to happen.
Wow.
How can I learn about basic immigration laws, John?
Well, it's very complicated. And it's an interesting question because those of us who are immigration specialists feel that even other attorneys who dabble, so to speak, in the area are risking malpractice. So really, you would have to go to law school would be the best idea and study immigration law and work for an immigration law firm for a while.
I agree. I think it's you can read the basics, but for every rule, it seems like there's 3 exceptions. So I would, you can read about it, but I wouldn't give anybody advice based upon just a simple reading.
Oh, here's an easy one, or relatively easy. Jim, how does a green card holder become a U.S. citizen?
They print a passport and walk around. No, I'm joking. So you have to be a permanent resident for a period of time, depending upon how you got your green card. So for many people, you have to have been a permanent resident for 5 years. You have to have had your green card for 5 years. There are people who can get it after 3 years if it's based upon marriage to a U.S. citizen and they are residing with that citizen. But if they break up with that citizen and get divorced before the 3 years, then they're going to end up having to wait the 5 years. John, who can apply for asylum?
Oh, and can I just tweak that last answer?
Sure.
Because it actually relates to the next question. And people who are refugees or came on asylum, that counting is a little bit different because you get an extra year credit based upon your date of entry.
And the Cubans get some special time too, right? I think they relate it back. Like if you marry a Cuban, I've seen this. If you marry a Cuban, I think they relate it back to your date of marriage, which is
Really?
kind of, yeah, which is kind of,
The Cubans get a lot of interesting.
yeah, I should have been born Cuban, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, wouldn't have had to do that affidavit of support for my wife, you know?
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Who can apply for asylum? Well, the first requirement is that you're in the country. We get that question, my sister's back in Venezuela and she's being persecuted. Can she apply for asylum? No, unfortunately, she can't apply for asylum because she's not in the country. Secondly, to apply for asylum, you have to have you either have to have been persecuted or you fear persecution based upon 5 grounds. I'm going to forget it because I'm under pressure here. Your political opinion. So that, like in Venezuela, sometimes comes up. People are in opposition to the government, and the colectivos and other things are threatening them or beating them up. So that would be political opinion. Your religion. We have people from other countries, particularly one that springs to mind is Egypt, where if you're from Egypt and you're a Christian, the government would persecutes Christians or allows people to persecute Christians. So that would be religion, your national origin, your race, which, sometimes you will have a situation where in certain I'm sorry, say you're African American in one country and those people are being persecuted, beaten up, that sort of thing. So that would be a basis. Then finally, the last group is special groups, social groups, which can be a variety of things. It's kind of complicated. And all that, but it has to be a relationship between the persecution and the government. Either the government is the actor or they're failing to act to protect you. And then again, you have to have been in the country generally for less than 1 year when you apply for asylum, with some current exceptions. That makes sense. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is don't take asylum lightly. It's very, very difficult. I'll tell you right off the bat, and I tell every client, we apply for asylum because a lot of times we don't have any choice, but the chances of winning those things are very slim. The government is very strict with asylum, so it's not easy to win those cases. John mentioned that there's a 1-year rule unless there's changed circumstances or some reason you couldn't apply for asylum in that first year. They're not going to give you asylum. There may be other types of protective programs, and I'm not going to go into them, but they're not political asylum that may be available for people after that first year. But again, so it has to be a person who has a reasonable fear of persecution in their country based upon one of these grounds, one of these reasons that John mentioned. And that just, all 3 of these questions come together. What can I apply for asylum if I'm undocumented and already living in the US? Yes, you can if it's the first year or you have an exception. And there's a question here about refugee status. A refugee is like someone with political asylum but they are applying from outside the country. So that's what a refugee is. So a refugee is someone who has applied outside the country, who's been screened, and then they're allowed into the United States. It's a form of political asylum, but they're called refugees. John, how can my family in Central America emigrate to the United States without breaking the law?
Well, so the first word that jumps to mind in this situation is family. So if you have legal status in the United States, then you can apply for, if you're, say you're a citizen, let's just start with that. You can apply for your parents, your children, your spouse, or if you're a citizen, you can apply for your brother or your sister. So the first step to get your family in Central America into the United States would be to file a relative petition, which we refer to as the I-130. And then depending upon the waiting time for that process, it could be with brothers and sisters, 20, 30 years even. But with parents and children of citizens, then it's going to be a lot sooner. Let's see, the other thing that jumps to mind, there is, do you know much about CAM?
Cam?
The Central American, I heard it came back, but I really hadn't followed up on it. The Central American, let's skip that.
Well, I think you're talking about the pre-screening program, right? For people wanting to
I
come
was
over.
talking about the reunification for.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't even read that stuff because I never believe it.
I just had one or two cases that came to me. Is the only reason why I paid attention to it.
So it actually worked.
It would have worked, yeah, in this one case, but I forget what the issue was. She aged out or something.
I just never
Yeah,
see it.
that's one.
I don't see any good faith in the U.S. dealing with Central America. I don't believe anything that they say that they're doing to help down there. I think it's window dressing, and it's going to continue on forever. But that's just my opinion.
And the other obvious thing without the family petition is what we've already discussed, that people can come to the border and present themselves and ask for asylum, and depending upon the politics of the time, they may be allowed into the country to pursue that.
Okay, so let's have a look at this one. My family lives in Central America. They have been saving money to start a bakery business in the U.S. or maybe invest in an already existing bakery. What should they do to start the process to emigrate? Do you want me to handle that one?
Please.
It's not easy to do. There are investor visas. I was just pulling one up. Honduras has an E2 investor visa. I'm seeing if El Salvador does, but there are ways to invest depending upon what country you are from. El Salvador does not. It looks like Honduras does. And I do not believe Guatemala does. I'm just looking right now. Guatemala does not. So if there's not an investor visa category, it is difficult to do because it's just very complicated. I'm not going to go that far into detail. It may be a little bit easier from Honduras if you can take the money and invest it in the United States. I'm not going to go through all the steps because it will take all night to do that. But you talk to an immigration attorney if that is a possibility. John, can
To sum up, though,
Go ahead.
what you were saying, it is possible. However, it's complicated, very complicated and specific. So if there is that situation, you should, your family should speak to an immigration professional about the situation.
Correct. Can undocumented people obtain health insurance, John?
I was hoping somebody that knew more about it would answer this question. As far as I know, since my fiance is not undocumented, but she's here without status here. What we usually tell people who are pending status to look for traveler's insurance and things that are short term. But in terms of longer term health insurance, the Obamacare, the federal government program, will not, unless there was a recent change, will not allow people to benefit under Obamacare. So,
Right. I'm going to take this one. I am undocumented. Do I need to file taxes? Very short answer. Yes. Okay. You want to go on?
If I may, there's a question in the chat. Could you cover what an alien registration number or alien ID is and how that is obtained? And also, are they allowed to use that in place of a social security number?
An
Well,
alien, go
yeah.
ahead, John, please.
alien registration number is something that is given to you by the immigration system, either when you're applying for a benefit or when you're in removal proceedings. Maybe, I think those are the only two situations you get an alien registration number. It's basically a number for the government to identify people, just using a number similar to a social security number. Can you use it in place of a social security number? Is that the question? You can use it for identification purposes, but it has not social security. It has pretty limited utility. I don't know if schools ask for it or anything like that. So basically, I guess the short answer would be no.
Okay, what is TPS? Who can apply for it? And what can I do if I'm granted TPS? You want me to handle that quickly, John?
That'd be great.
TPS is temporary protected status. And basically the government designates people from certain countries who are here by a certain date, a type of protection so that they don't have to go back. And it's an administrative type of protection that allows them to get a work authorization document and to work lawfully in the United States. And they can have a social security card and report their income with their social security number. And in some limited circumstances too, they can travel out of the country if they get advance permission. It is not a path to citizenship. It is not a path to a green card. It is just saying you are here and you can be here while you are here legally, and you can get a driver's license and live a fairly normal life, but we're not giving you a green card based upon this. And the reason they do that is many times there will be a disaster, a natural disaster, or a problem in a country, and there are a bunch of people from that country here in the United States, and they don't want to be seen forcing them to go back to their home country, so they accommodate them. I think that's the best way to describe that.
Mm-hmm.
John, what does it mean that DACA and TPS do not provide a path to citizenship?
Okay, just to dovetail what Jim mentioned, that these are basically humanitarian programs. They're not standard immigration pathways. And so with TPS, it's temporary. It says it's temporary, although the majority of TPS have never been terminated. So basically it means we allow you to stay here. We give you a work card, but you're never going to be able to get a permanent resident card. You'll never be able to petition for anybody with your status. You'll never be able to obtain citizenship and vote, and you'll never be able to, in many cases, leave, but for a very short period of time. And so it's you don't have a pathway to permanency in the United States. And if you commit a crime that is even more than slightly minor, you could lose your status.
I think you hit it's kind of a 3 strikes you're out. I think it's 3 misdemeanors and you're done. So yeah, that's correct. Who is eligible to obtain a work permit? A work permit is not something that you just obtain. You have to have a basis like DACA or TPS or another application. So it depends upon what applications you're filing. If you don't qualify for any of these applications, then you do not qualify for a work permit. So when you ask who is eligible to obtain a work permit, all the people who are eligible to apply for some form of status, and it would take us all night to go through that. But a lot of times it's people who are married to US citizens, who have DACA, who have sometimes it's people who have pending asylum applications. There are a number of people who can get a work permit. John, I have lived in this country for 6 years. I entered with a tourist visa. Can I say that I'm on a visa although it has expired?
When you enter with a tourist visa, at this point, you get a, what is the word? All of a sudden, I'm drawing a blank.
I-94.
I-94, thank you. And your I-94 gives you a specific time period which you're allowed to stay in the country. And when that expires, then your visa is over. Some of our clients say, oh, I have a 10-year visa, thinking that that means that they can just be here for 10 years. And those situations just means that you don't have to apply for a visa every time you leave the country for a new visa. But basically, if you're here with a tourist visa and it's expired, you're here 6 years, you're not here on a visa. You may have can't come with a visa, but you're not here. Being here on a visa implies that you're here lawfully. Right.
Can I open a bank account if I am undocumented?
That's kind of up to the banks. We hear that people can go to Bank of America with and open bank accounts. So I would say that that's something that goes from bank to bank.
Right. I think, listen, I have clients that have been undocumented for many years, and they'll come in with an ATM card and it's a bank account. I'm kind of like the monkey who hears no evil and sees no evil. I don't ask too many questions.
Exactly.
So what I say about that is avoid using fraudulent documents.
Right.
And if you can open it, you can open it. I don't get onto that level with the clients.
Yeah.
Um,
There seem to be some chat questions. However, I'm having trouble doing anything with them.
let's do it.
I can field those for you if you'd like. One question we have are, what are types of federal benefit programs that undocumented families can apply? Is it safe to apply for the free or reduced lunch program for children?
John, I'm gonna just jump in here. I think the free or reduced lunch is probably okay, but I don't even want to give an opinion on this because I don't have the law in front of me, and I don't want to risk giving a wrong answer. But some of these programs can have an impact in the future. So I would say just come in and do a consultation with the attorney, because and I'm not trying to get out of it. It's that the rules have changed a couple of times in the last year. And I think it went back to the prior system. So it's not that big of a deal on some of these, but I don't even want to talk about any one of them specifically.
I do want to just dovetail with that a little bit from my years at Legal Aid, that I want to create a line between benefits for citizen children and immigrant or undocumented parents. Just remember that some of these benefits are for citizen children, not for the parents. So,
and I want you to really develop that, John. I don't want to give the impression either that if you have a US citizen kid that needs this stuff, as long as that undocumented parent is not on what we call the grant or the
Right.
benefit, it's okay. That is not the undocumented parent getting that benefit. And so it's very important. I would really not want to see kids deprived of what is their due,
Right.
because this country
Exactly.
gives out so little to begin with. So yeah, I would just talk to the attorneys about that.
Right. Another question?
Yes. So what can I do since I had an open case with an immigration attorney, but their office closed and they have not contacted me to know what's going on?
Their office closed.
Like the office is no longer where they've been going.
Interesting. I've actually had a few cases like that. And I guess, the first thing we need to know is who is the attorney, so we can investigate whether they're even in business anymore. If they're a Florida attorney, and probably in other cases in other states, you can go to the bar association and get an address and a phone number. And so that's step one. Try your darndest to find out if they moved. It certainly sounds like a bar violation to move and not tell your clients where you've gone to. So that's something that you're gonna have to investigate, and you can make if they've done that, you can make a bar complaint. But that doesn't solve your problem. I'm sure Jim has done this. I've had to pick up for cases from attorneys that have been disbarred or gone out of business or something, and we'll have to basically piece together the information we have through FOIAs and whatever else to see what we can do for the client.
Okay. Another question, and we'll wrap up in a few minutes, so we'll only get to a few more questions, is I'm currently in the process of DACA, so the alien registration ID/number that they give. Like, I guess they're a student, they're wanting to take driver's ed, and they're wondering whether or not they can use that number for the driver's ed course. And they haven't given the student their DACA yet. And do you recommend they wait until they have given it to them, and then use the alien ID for that course, or what would you recommend they do?
I think it would depend upon the rules of the school, but normally when you do a DACA, you get an employment authorization document, and that opens up all the doors to your benefits. So I think, if I'm understanding the question properly, I would say you really need to have that employment authorization document.
Another question, and we'll get to one more question after this, and then we'll end for the evening. My question is that my husband, they processed his permit when he was a child, but he never went to the place and could ASCR your request. I don't know if that's
Hacer?
ASCR.
I'm just guessing. Sometimes.
That's very good, John. Good catch, my friend.
Yeah.
It's not spelled like ASCR, but maybe could he make a request? He has, I guess, U.S. insurance. I'm not understanding the question, to be honest.
Let's see. My person, my esposa.
Where is it?
Little.
I'll say it in
But,
Spanish.
okay.
Mi pregunta es: mi esposo le tramitaron el permiso cuando era niño, pero nunca fue a la cita hoy, o él podría hacer su petición. Él tiene el seguro de Estados Unidos.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's it. Yep. Good job, John.
Thank you. This is a perfect situation where we would do a Freedom of Information Act request to find out what was in the files that could help the client.
Yeah, I would say when the problem you really need to look at the background on that case, because if you abandon a case, you're not going to be able to probably, if it's been many, many years, it's going to be very, very difficult. So you want to know what's going on, but there may be some hidden surprises that are good. Maybe qualifies for 245I, where he can pay a fine and do an adjustment if he came in illegally. I mean, you really want the attorneys to look at it and pull that file apart and see what can be done.
Okay, and the last question we'll get to tonight is, if my parents are visiting here, will it have any impact on me or them, considering I have not completed my immigration process?
So the question is, if my parents are visiting from out of the country, I take it. No, I don't see where it would have any impact. Jim, can you?
I agree. I mean, no, I don't see it as having an impact.
Is
I
there,
want to chime in because in the chat we have multiple references to what's DACA. People want to understand what's DACA and what is the status of DACA right now.
Okay, DACA is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It's for kids who got here before their 16th birthday and have been present in the country since, I want to say unlawfully since June of 2007. If they don't have any serious crimes, if they are working towards getting their high school diploma, if they don't have it, they can get what is called a deferred action. And that is the government saying, we're taking our hands off of this person. We're not going to try to remove them. And while they're waiting here for something good to happen, we're going to give them a work authorization. So it protects children who came here at a young age through no fault of their own and who complete their studies. That's the best way I can describe it.
Question is DACA changing right now or remains the same? Are there any added benefits or a path to citizenship for DACA recipients?
Go ahead, John.
Not as of this time. Nothing has changed. The only thing that did change is that I think there was quite a number of people in the country, maybe, I don't know, I'll just throw out a number, 80 to 100,000, who are eligible that didn't apply for DACA. For those people who didn't apply, they can now apply. But
No path to citizenship. It's just
no path to citizenship. Right.
okay, well, I guess we'll end on that note.
There is one question that has been posted twice. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Not at all.
Our famous friend, Don Carlos. This is very important. Please ask the attorneys, what is your opinion on undocumented males having to register with the Selective Service when they turn 18 and before they turn 26? Do you want to answer that?
I don't see it as an issue. Immigration has not brought that up. If you are undocumented during that time period from 18 to 26, and say you marry a U.S. citizen at 27, they don't come after them for failing, or they don't require them to have really applied for, have registered for the Selective Service. Usually Selective Service comes up as a good moral character issue on naturalization, but normally you had to have been in lawful status to be required to register. And that's the way it has come up in the immigration context.
All right. Any other questions, Luce, that we should get to?
If anybody knows people from Haiti, there was a recent discussion, announcement rather, that they were going to have a new TPS program for people from Haiti. So just put
Good
that
news.
out to the community. We're waiting for more forms and things of that nature, but
I think they've been here by the date of May 21st.
yeah.
So good news.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here. I'm going to share my screen just so there are a few people asking for contact information. This is the contact information of the two wonderful attorneys who have so generously donated their time to us tonight. So you may want to screenshot this. If you don't get the opportunity, you can of course go to our Facebook page and play the video back and you'll be able to see this again. There's also the contact information for the Catholic Charities Organization. They do provide DACA assistance at a very low cost. And this is their number for their Sarasota office. So I'm just going to keep this up here for just a moment, just in case you'd like to screenshot it. Okay. And of course, at the end of every community workshop, we ask that you complete this survey just so we know what you liked, what we could do better next time, any changes you would like to see in the future. So if you could really, if you could fill out the survey, we would really appreciate it. Of course, resources to learn more. We really want, if you know students who are going into high school, please encourage them to join our clubs. They'll get a lot of information and resources. We have a lot of wonderful club officers, especially for students who are DACA and undocumented. They can get a lot of information through these clubs. So like I said, please promote them to any young people that you know. If you have any more questions, you can of course contact myself. That's my contact information there. You can send me an email or you can give me a call and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Also, I encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, go to our website if you haven't already. That's where you can stay up to date with all of the information that you need to know. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. A huge thank you to John Dubrule and Jim Martin for being here. We really appreciate it. And a huge thank you to Karen for interpreting this session. Thank you, Luz, for being here as well. So I hope that everyone enjoys the rest of their evening. It has been great and we will see you all in the future.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you again to both of you.